How we doing, everybody? This is Critical Fish here. Gonna be using today's episode as a way to kind of showcase parts of my PS4 collection and my PS5 collection, specifically the physical games that I own. I will not be including digital games in this list today, but there's some more games that are coming out that I plan on buying for the collection that I will be going over. But yeah, mostly just reflecting on the games that I already own and which ones I like, which ones are not the best, and which ones I still need to play. Um, and hopefully this is a cool way for you guys to kind of understand what I own and what I like to play and how my tastes in games have changed over time. So let's get into it. So let's start right up by hopping into the single player games. These are listed in order of enjoyment. So on the far right, I have my favorite games, and then as you go left, the enjoyment kind of wears down. So let's start off at the bottom here. The first one we've got is Dreams. It's a PlayStation exclusive. Hasn't received a PS5 update yet, but it's a fun game. It's very creative and kind of hones back to my enjoyment playing, Super Mario Maker when I was a kid. There's a lot of creative elements in this game, so a lot of people have made crazy levels. There's even Mario levels in here, which is wild. So it's a cool concept game, but nothing really insane. And right here we got Cyberpunk. The only reason I own this is because there was a $10 steal for the game and all the extra content that came with it. I mean, it's cool, but obviously this game came out with a lot of criticism that it was unfinished, unpolished, and just, expectations were high and they were not met at all. I will play through this someday, but for now, I'm just kind of waiting on the free DLC and stuff, and I'll play it down the line. The next one I've got here is Prey. This was a purchase that I made after playing some Resident Evil games and after I played Deathloop, which is another game from Arcane Studios. I have not finished this one yet. I am about halfway through. It's cool, but it's nothing crazy, especially with 30 FPS, and, the gameplay isn't the greatest. It's a little clunky, but it definitely has a cool atmosphere and attention to detail, so I might play it at some point. Next up is Dying Light. I bought this for, I think, $10. Most of these cases actually were very cheap. I'm starting to discover more games as I play, so usually they're on sale by the time I get around to it. I have not played this one yet, though. I plan to because the 60 FPS update came out, so I'll play it at some point. The next game I've gotten here is Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight is amazing. It is a 2D platformer in 8-bit style from an indie studio. This originally came out on the Wii U. That's how I first played it, and then I picked it up on PS4. It even comes with a nice little manual in here that showcases how to play the game with all the different artwork for it, which is pretty cool. I picked this up for around $20 used. And yeah, this is an amazing game. I have the platinum for it, so it was really fun to platinum too. Here we got Nier Automata. I bought this for around $20. I got the variant with no review scores on the front and no Game of the Year. I just kind of like the clean look of the original case. And, this is a game that gets a lot of critical reception. But I personally didn't enjoy it too much. I thought a lot of it was boring. Um, the gameplay is visually cool and the areas are visually cool, but there's no real depth to the gameplay here. Um, there's more story focus than anything, but the story is still pretty vague. So I didn't click with this one as much as I had hoped to, but it's still a cool game. And a game that ties directly to that is Replicant, Nier Replicant. This is a remake of the original Nier and a prequel to Nier Automata. And I personally enjoyed this one more than Automata because the characters were really good and there was a little bit more meat to the gameplay and I don't know, just a little more emotion in the story. Pretty fun, still definitely falls in line with Automata in terms of its repetitiveness and vague story, but it's still a good experience. I got this for around $15 new. SpiderMan. This was a really fun release when it came out, really close to when God of War released. And, around this time, Marvel was getting a lot of attention for the new movies coming out. They were kind of at their prime. So having this in addition to all the good movies was amazing. I'm not a huge Spider-Man fan or Marvel fan, but this game has a really good story. Definitely some repetition with the gameplay. But a really fun experience from Insomniac. Here we got Red Dead Redemption 2. I didn't know about this game series until about a week before I bought it at launch. A friend at school had told me that he saw the previews for this and that it seemed like it was going to be one of the best games released for the year. So I just decided to pick it up. It comes with the map for the game and 2 different discs, which is pretty cool. The story takes about 60 to 80 hours to complete, which is insane, but in the end it was worth it, especially if you play the epilogue. But overall, very good game, very, very good. And one of the very first games to get me into the survival horror genre, Resident Evil 7. When this game came out, there was, a ton of praise for it. This game is super scary, and there was a lot of reactions happening on YouTube around the time to kind of showcase this game. I didn't play it until around when Village was coming out. So when I finally sat down and played this for myself, I was scared out of my mind, but it gets a little repetitive towards the boat section, definitely the weakest point of the game. But the main house is incredible and iconic, and yeah, it's a great survival horror game. And here we got Control. I had to get the PS4 case because the colors on it looked great. I just like the red and the white. I actually played the PS5 version of this game for the first time when it launched on PS Plus, and I got the platinum for it. It's a really good game while you're playing it. I think a lot of the fun comes from the exploration and the gameplay upgrades that you get over time. It's pretty scary at some points, but it's mostly about the exploration of the world, and I think the setting is really creepy. And, not many other games are doing what Control does, so definitely had to pick up the case for it. Here we've got Jedi Fallen Order. a Star Wars Souls-like video game. This was actually the first, Souls-like game that I've played, that I played at the time when I purchased it. I bought this during my freshman year of college at a local GameStop. I actually pre-ordered it about an hour before they released it, so was able to get a copy. And this was also one of my first platinums too. This is a really good game with a forgettable story and definitely some clunk to the gameplay, but it's a really good game made by Respawn, the same developers of Titanfall and Apex, so I had to pick this up, and it was pretty good. Here we got Ghost of Tsushima. I bought this at launch. I got the replacement cover to have the original version of the artwork. The launch edition paper is actually right behind this paper, and that's just because I am very picky about the physical copies that I collect. So I usually like to have the original clean artwork, not a game of the year, not a launch edition, not a day one edition, stuff like that. But anyways, Ghost of Tsushima, awesome open world game. Definitely streamlined a lot of elements that were getting repetitive in other open world games. I'd say it's more fun than something like Horizon in terms of its simplicity and convenience factor. The story is really good. Gameplay is really clean, and there's some badass moments in the story. Definitely a really good game, and I hope the sequel does a lot of improvements, and I hope it's next gen only. We're getting to about the halfway point for the physical collection. I will not try to spoil what's over here, but we're about halfway through the stack. Shadow of the Colossus. My buddy Luke recommended this game to me. He played the original back in the day, and he said that it's one of his favorite games of all time. And to be honest, this game is very frustrating when you're playing it and when you're messing up, but learning how to tackle each of these bosses in this really atmospheric open world, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, and I can't really say there's many other games like this. It's disappointing that the company's other games are not as good as this, but that's a topic for another video. I think Shadow of the Colossus is a really good remake and a really good, 10-hour experience on PS4. Another hugely controversial game, but one of the best ones on PS4, I'd say. Last of Us Part 2. This was an unwanted sequel to a classic game, The Last of Us. And this sequel does a lot of things that fans were not happy with. But what was important to me was taking the game for what it was and kind of seeing what they could do. And the gameplay was insanely detailed and realistic. The story was definitely impactful, and maybe even more impactful than the first game. But the quality of that story is up for debate. And, replay value-wise, has a decent amount of replay value, but I haven't touched this game since I've beaten it. But I will go back and play this one day. Next up, we got Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. This is one of FromSoft's games. First of many that you're about to see on this single-player journey. But Sekiro is very tough, and Does not do any hand holding for the player. It's a very good game. The mechanics are solid, and there's a lot of customization when it comes to building your own Sekiro. But the big highlight of this game are the environments and the different bosses that you fight, kind of like the other Souls games. It's definitely in its own league, though, of Souls-like. I wouldn't even say it's a Souls-like, but it's really good. But I would start with the other games that I'm about to talk about before playing this. So the next 3 games that are in the single player section are the Dark Souls games. As of recording, the order would be something like this. Probably this. I change my mind every day. But Dark Souls 2 would be in last. Dark Souls would be next, and Dark Souls 3 would be first. These games are very unique and fun. Dark Souls 2 is very good at making the player explore a lot and doesn't punish you that much for doing exploration. Dark Souls 1 has, some classic areas and music as well as level design. When you loop back to previous areas, it's been said 100 times, but it's a really good feeling. And then Dark Souls 3, for me, is a very memorable experience. I think Dark Souls 3 is the most fun to play out of these 3 in terms of gameplay. Definitely has some more forgettable areas, but very fun boss fights and a gameplay loop. And now I'd say we're getting into the very top parts of the list. There's only a few games left. This is number 9. Horizon Zero Dawn. I bought this a couple months after it came out. This was my introduction to, the new studios of PlayStation and what they could do. I thought when Horizon came out, it was the best looking game ever made. But it wasn't just the graphics, it was the gameplay that held this title up for me. I was about 5 or 6 years younger than I am now, and I was really enjoying this game for what it was because I was so used to playing smaller size Nintendo games, so having a huge open world to explore was crazy and definitely was more entertaining than something like Breath of the Wild would have been for me at the time. Next up, we got Resident Evil 3 Remake. This is very different from the original game from what I've heard, but I played this after I played Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 1 Remake. And I don't really have anything bad to say about this game besides how short it may feel. But it makes up for that short playtime with a lot of replay value and unique, interesting locations, including boss fights. And I don't know. It's a very fun, action-oriented survival horror game that builds off of what 2 Remake did, which I can appreciate. So, definitely a fun game. Another classic game. This was an unexpected purchase when it came out, but the trailers convinced me. I had played Doom 2016 and did not really enjoy it that much. But Doom Eternal, man. The parkour, the weapons, the glory kills, it's what makes the game, and the levels are all really interesting and fun. So, definitely worth the money, and it's definitely in my top 3 FPS games probably ever. Another classic. This is number 5 on the list. Uncharted 4, Thieves End. I had played Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 leading up to this game's release, which was really great because 1, 2, and 3 trilogy was remastered on PS4 around the time when I bought a PS4, so I was really excited to play this just a couple months after. And yeah, it still holds up today. I have not played it in a little while, but definitely my favorite Naughty Dog game. I think The Last of Us is great, but I think this game is amazing. And it's right in front of 2 for me. So that's Uncharted 4. And here we go, number 4, God of War. I bought this at launch. The trailers looked exceptionally exciting, and the reviews were overwhelmingly positive, so I decided to pre-order it. And, you know, what else can be said about this game? I think it's really fun. The only negatives I have are the repetitions with some of the mini bosses or side missions in the game, but besides that, God of War is incredible, especially if you're going for the platinum. You know, fighting some of those extra tough bosses towards the end of the game is crazy satisfying if you take the time to 100% the game. So definitely a classic. Can't wait for Ragnarok. I think Ragnarok will top this for sure. So let's get on to number 3. Now my top 3, the number 1 spot always stays the same, but 2 and 3 are mixed up sometimes. So currently my number 3 is Bloodborne. A game that I thought would never appeal to me and that would never even be in my household, but here I am with the Bloodborne Platinum and almost 3 playthroughs done, the third one being for fun. This game is insanely good. It's the best From Software game there is today. Blows Elden Ring out of the water. Bloodborne's environment, music, bosses, level design, it's all there. It's all exceptionally done. And, you know, this game is tough. But once you know it, you'll know it like the back of your hand. It's really fun. I hope they do a remake for PS5 someday. I would play the shit out of it. So that's my number 3 pick. My number 2 pick is Resident Evil 2. The first Resident Evil game that I played. And this was played for the first time about 1.5 years ago. And this was the game that introduced me to all the different Resident Evil games and the survival horror genre. And before I played this, I didn't think I would be one to enjoy horror as much as I do, but this game is nearly perfect in my opinion. I think the gameplay, once you understand what you're doing, it's kind of like I Spy, and you know, you're sourcing materials from the police station or the sewers to fight your way through zombies and puzzles and shocking events with cool bosses. I love the third person, and the cutscenes are great. The music and atmosphere is amazing. There's so many little details to this game that just, I think about this game so much because it's so fun. You know, Mr. X, the various puzzles, it's just great. And, you know, I hope they remake Resident Evil 1 in this style, because I think that would be the only game to top this one. Now, let's go to number 1. And my number one pick for PS4 games is Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is a game that I was not excited for until 2019 when it was supposed to come out. I had seen the trailers during E3, witnessed a lot of people freaking out about this remake, but I didn't know what Final Fantasy VII was. I kind of thought Final Fantasy, the brand, was just kind of typical Japanese fantasy stuff, but this game is special, especially the original. But playing this first without knowing what the original was like was unbelievable. This is easily my favorite game in terms of gameplay, story, action, emotion, and just graphics, I would say, on PS4. Really, I think this is a 10 out of 10 game, and anybody on PlayStation needs to play this. Yeah, I own so much merchandise now because of this game, and you know, I have played through this game about 4 or 5 times now, including the PS5 version and the DLC that comes with that, and it blows me away every single time. This is an amazing game and definitely makes my number one. So, with that being said, I'll put this back here and we'll go over the rest of the collection next time. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video on my favorite single player games on PS4 that I own physically. So, thank you.